On the map of Alaska, there's a mountain that looks almost perfectly symmetrical. A massive white cone rises above the surrounding plains and glaciers. That's Denali, the highest peak in North America. Every year, hundreds of climbers from all over the world come here to try to reach the summit. But there's one thing about this mountain that you won't see in most travel brochures. There are people on Denali who went up once and never came back down. Sometimes it's climbers who died during the ascent. Sometimes it's people caught in storms, avalanches, or extreme cold. And the strangest part is that many of them are still up there. For most people, that sounds hard to believe. We're used to the idea that in today's world, there are rescue teams, helicopters, and trained crews that can reach almost anywhere. If someone gets into trouble in the mountains, there's usually an attempt to bring them back. But on Denali, things work differently. People aren't brought down. And to understand why that happens, you first have to look at the mountain itself and the conditions people face when they try to climb it. Denali is located in central Alaska, inside Denali National Park and Preserve. It's the highest mountain in North America, rising to about 20,310 feet above sea level. In the US, this peak holds a special place. It's not just a mountain, it's the highest point on the entire continent. If you look at a map, Denali sits pretty far from any major cities. The closest large city, Anchorage, is roughly 125 miles to the south. But even from there, you can't just drive up to the mountain. Most climbers get in by small planes that land directly on glaciers near the base. From the air, Denali looks like a massive snow-covered pyramid. It rises sharply above the surrounding plains and glaciers. Unlike mountain ranges like the Himalayas, where multiple high peaks sit close together, Denali stands almost on its own. That's what makes it stand out so much in the landscape. That's one reason why hundreds of climbers from all over the world come here every year. Most expeditions attempt the route known as the West Buttress, the most popular way to reach the summit. It's considered technically accessible, but even then, it usually takes several weeks to complete. Climbers typically start at around 6,500 feet on the Kahiltna Glacier. From there, they spend 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes longer, moving up the mountain. During that time, they have to slowly adjust to the altitude, wait out bad weather, and hope for a short window when conditions are good enough to push for the summit. And this is where the story starts to change, because Denali is one of the harshest mountains on Earth. At first glance, Denali might seem less extreme than Everest or the big peaks in the Himalayas. It's more than 2 miles lower than Mount Everest, so a lot of people assume it should be easier to climb. But in reality, it's not. One of the main reasons is geography. Denali sits much farther north than most famous climbing peaks, almost at 63 degrees north latitude. That means the climate here is much colder than in places like the Himalayas or the Andes. Near the upper parts of the mountain, temperatures can drop well below -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and strong winds make it feel even worse. In some cases, winds can hit over 60 miles per hour. But it's not just about the cold. Denali rises almost straight out of the low plains of Alaska. In the Himalayas, many base camps already sit at around 13,000 to 16,000 feet. On Denali, it's different. Climbers usually start at about 6,500 feet, which means they have to climb almost the entire mountain themselves, step by step. On top of that, most routes go across glaciers. These ice fields are full of crevasses, many of them hidden under snow. Moving through these areas means staying roped up at all times and being constantly careful. And then there's the weather. On Denali, it can change very fast. A clear day can turn into a full snowstorm within hours, with almost zero visibility. All of this combined makes Denali a mountain where multiple extreme factors come together at once: cold, elevation, glaciers, and unpredictable weather. And that's exactly what makes rescue operations here much harder than most people expect. But in most mountain regions around the world, rescue operations today are pretty organized. If a climber gets injured, lost, or ends up in a dangerous situation, there's usually a system in place that can try to get them out. The first part of that system is communication. Modern expeditions use satellite phones, radios, or emergency beacons. If something goes wrong, the team can send out a distress signal and share their exact location. After that, rescue teams step in. In some countries, there are specialized mountain units, crews trained specifically to operate at high altitude. They know how to move across glaciers, handle steep terrain, and carry out evacuations in tough conditions. In many cases, aircraft play the key role. Helicopters make it possible to reach climbers who are far from any towns. Pilots can drop rescuers onto a slope or lift an injured climber using a winch. In more accessible areas, this can sometimes mean getting someone out within just a few hours. Sometimes rescues happen without helicopters. In those cases, ground teams are sent in. They climb up to the injured person, provide first aid, and then help bring them back down. In popular mountain regions, this kind of thing happens all the time. In the Alps, for example, helicopters are sent out on rescue missions every day. In some cases, climbers can be evacuated the same day. So most people have a pretty simple idea of how mountain rescues work. If someone gets into trouble, rescuers should be able to reach them. But on Denali, that logic starts to break down. The main problem with rescue operations on Denali starts with its location. The mountain sits in one of the most remote parts of the United States. There are no roads, no towns, and no real infrastructure around it. Even base camps are set up on glaciers, and the only way to reach them is by small planes. That means any rescue here starts off much harder than in most other mountain regions. But even when rescuers get a distress signal, the next problem is the weather. On Denali, it can shut the mountain down completely for days at a time. High winds, heavy snowfall, and poor visibility can make helicopter flights impossible. Sometimes climbers are forced to wait for better conditions for several days while dealing with extreme cold. And even when the weather clears, helicopters face another major limitation: altitude. The higher a helicopter goes, the less air there is for its engines and rotor blades to work with. Simply put, the helicopter loses lift. On some parts of Denali, helicopters just can't hover steadily enough to carry out a safe evacuation. Because of that, many rescue operations only go up to a certain elevation. If a climber is too high on the route, rescuers sometimes have to reach them on foot, and that can take a long time. Another challenge is the terrain. Routes on Denali cross glaciers, steep snow slopes, and narrow ridges. These areas are full of crevasses, many of them hidden under the snow. Moving through this kind of terrain is dangerous even for experienced climbers. So when a rescue team goes up, they're facing the same risks as any expedition. On top of that, rescue teams have to carry extra gear. Medical kits, stretchers, ropes, and other equipment add weight and slow everything down. As a result, even a simple rescue can turn into a full expedition that takes several days. And during all that time, conditions keep getting worse. The weather can shift, temperatures drop, and winds pick up. In some cases, by the time rescuers reach the location, it's already too late. That's why there are situations on Denali where help simply doesn't arrive in time. And even if rescuers do reach the person, another problem begins: getting them back down. When someone dies in the mountains, most people expect their body to be brought down. In normal conditions, that's usually what happens. But on Denali, that's not always possible. And the main reason is weight. A human body, along with gear, can easily weigh over 220 pounds. On flat ground, that might not seem like a big problem. But on steep, icy slopes or narrow ridges, moving that kind of weight becomes extremely dangerous. Even for several strong climbers, bringing a body down can be much harder than just moving along the route. Another factor is avalanche risk. Many parts of the mountain pass through areas where avalanches are more likely. Moving slowly with a heavy load means spending more time in those zones, which increases the danger. In other words, a recovery operation can put multiple people at risk. Then there are the glaciers. If someone dies near a crevasse or falls into one, recovering the body can be nearly impossible. Some crevasses go down hundreds of feet and continue deep under the glacier. In those cases, rescuers simply can't reach the body safely, and sometimes the situation is even more dangerous. Strong winds, extreme cold, and steep terrain can make any attempt to move a body too risky. In those conditions, even experienced rescue teams may decide to call off the operation. This is one of the hardest decisions in mountain rescue work. For many people, that sounds harsh, but for rescuers, one principle always comes first. You don't risk more lives for an operation that could end in another tragedy. That's been the rule for a long time. The history of climbing Denali goes back over 100 years, and during that time, many tragedies have happened on its slopes. According to the U.S. National Park Service, more than 100 climbers have died on this mountain since the early 1900s. In some cases, their bodies were never brought down and still remain on the mountain. One of the most well-known cases happened in 1984 with Japanese climber Naomi Uemura. He was one of the most famous polar explorers and mountaineers of his time. In February, he completed the first-ever solo winter ascent of Denali. After reaching the summit, he radioed in from a camp during his descent. That was his last message. A search operation was launched, but strong winds and extreme cold made it extremely difficult. Rescuers were only able to find traces of his campsite. Uemura himself was never found. It's believed he died during the descent, and his body is still somewhere on the mountain. Similar incidents have happened more recently. In May 2024, a Japanese climber identified as T. Hagiwara died on Denali. He was climbing via the West Buttress, the most commonly used route on the mountain. While this route is considered safer than others, it still has sections where a single mistake can be fatal. Hagiwara was climbing alone and was on the high traverse between High Camp and Denali Pass. In this section, the slope drops off sharply toward the glacier, and the route follows a narrow snow ridge. According to the National Park Service, he fell from a significant height. His body was recovered later. Another well-known case happened in 2008 with American climber James Nasty. He reached the summit of Denali with his group, but during the descent, he suddenly collapsed on the summit. At elevations above 20,000 feet, the human body is pushed to its limits, and even well-trained climbers can suddenly experience critical health issues. Nasty died on the summit. Bringing his body down from that altitude would have required risking the lives of others, so it was left on the mountain. And here's what's interesting. When people hear about bodies being left on Denali, they often ask, why is it handled differently on Mount Everest? At first, that sounds strange. Everest is much higher, and the conditions there are just as harsh. But the difference comes down to infrastructure. Everest has become the center of commercial mountaineering. Every year, hundreds of climbers attempt the summit as part of organized expeditions. Alongside them are dozens of Sherpas, guides, and support crews. The mountain has a well-developed system of camps, fixed routes, and logistical support. There's also an entire industry built around Everest. Expeditions have access to large teams, equipment, and resources. In some cases, multiple teams may be involved just to bring a body down. Aviation also plays a role. In Nepal, helicopters are widely used and can operate at relatively high elevations. In some situations, this allows climbers to be evacuated more quickly. And while there are still bodies on Everest that remain on the routes, overall, there are far more resources available. Denali, by comparison, remains far more isolated. And that leads to the main question. Can Denali be made less dangerous? In theory, yes. In practice, almost impossible. Sometimes people suggest building permanent rescue infrastructure. For example, placing high-altitude shelters along key parts of the route, or installing fixed radio beacons and weather stations at higher elevations. In the Alps, systems like this actually exist. There are mountain huts, cable cars, and permanent rescue services. But Denali exists in a completely different environment. It's a vast wilderness area covering more than 9,000 square miles, with no roads, no infrastructure, and no permanent human presence. And even if a few shelters were built on the mountain, they wouldn't solve the main problem, the weather. Another option would be to completely close the mountain or severely limit access. But Denali is part of a U.S. national park and one of the most iconic peaks in the world. Every year, hundreds of climbers come here. Completely banning climbs would mean shutting down one of the most important climbs in the world. So today, there's really only one option: preparation and prevention. Before climbing, all expeditions are required to register with the National Park Service, submit a route plan, and carry communication equipment. Rescue teams monitor conditions and can coordinate operations when the weather allows. But even with all of that, Denali remains what it has always been: a massive, cold mountain where people are always pushed to their limits. And that's why climbers who go there understand one simple thing: if something goes wrong, help most likely isn't coming.